Hi, I'm Peter Julks from Barclays, and with my colleague Carl Olchin, I'm going to be talking to you today about how we're liberating our data with Tableau. So over the next hour, we're going to talk about various things and show you some of the stuff we've done. And if at any point you fancy following us on Twitter, there are our handles below. Okay. So Barclays, who are we? I'm sure most of you will probably be familiar with Barclays. We're a global international bank founded in 1690, so we've been around for an awful long time. Barclays has been a leader in innovation in various different aspects of banking, most recently the mobile banking apps that we've come out with, including Barclays Ping It, which is a mobile payments app. And we like to think that some of the innovative work that we're doing with Tableau kind of follows in the vein of innovation that you can see on the screen right there. Barclays is an international large bank, so we've got 140,000 employees globally, over 50 million customers, and 20 million customers just here in the UK. Barclays has two sections to it, an investment bank and a retail bank, and we both work in the retail bank, and that's mostly the data that we're going to be talking about today is from retail banking. So that kind of means, the everyday banking that people do in terms of having a current account, going to a branch, having savings, that kind of stuff. So Barclays and Tableau. And why do we like Tableau? So Tableau allows us to do two related things. One is data exploration, and the other is knowledge sharing and empowerment. In terms of data exploration, we have an enormous amount of data at Barclays. So if you think of yourself as a customer of a bank and the kind of data that we might hold about someone like you in terms of your bank accounts, the way you spend money, your demographics, the way you interact with the bank in terms of online banking or telephony, we have data around all of that. And with that amount of data, we need to be able to explore it very quickly. Now, in the past, the way we explored that data would be we would take it from our data warehouse, which is a Teradata data warehouse, and we would export that data by writing some SQL, maybe dump that into Excel, and then we'd look at those results, and we would, maybe draw some charts, and then we'd find out that we probably didn't have the answer we were looking for, so we'd have to go back from scratch, and then do some more coding and dump it into Excel, and follow that kind of cycle of data exploring. But now with Tableau, that's much, much quicker. So we can connect Tableau directly into our Teradata warehouse, and we can start to manipulate the data on screen at the speed of thought, right in front of our eyes, and really start exploring very, very quickly what we have. We can join data sets together, we can do manipulation of data, calculated fields, and that really allows us to get from a large data set to a particular insight very, very quickly. And also because of that speed, allows us to think and be a bit more innovative with the way that we look at data than we would be able to with a sort of more traditional approach. On the back of that, once we've found something that's useful, what we like to do is share that with our colleagues. And again, in the kind of old way of doing things, the way we would share with our business stakeholders, so we being analysts, business stakeholders being the people who make the strategic decisions about product development or marketing or the way the company's going. We would package the data that we have, maybe put it into PowerPoint or maybe send an Excel spreadsheet, and that's the only way we could really get across our messages. But now we can use Tableau Server to give interactive dashboards to people so they can explore data on their own, they can find their own insights, and we can present much more engaging visuals to people. That's also allowed us to really sort of push the culture and around empowerment around our colleagues. So in terms of being able to get things to a much wider audience, we have hundreds of thousands of employees in Barclays, most of whom will not see 99% of the data that we store, even though it could be very useful to their job. So one of the things we're trying to do is take some of the insights that we found within Tableau from our data sets and push those out to a very wide audience. And Tableau is really letting us do that very quickly. So tying those two things together, data exploration and the knowledge sharing, which Tableau allows us to do, has really been the reason why we enjoy using it and why it's been quite a success at Barclays.
So, who are we and what do we really do within Barclays? Well, Peter mentioned we're data analysts, but we're data analysts with definitely a real strong customer focused. Yes, most of that is on the retail side of things, but we also look at businesses, corporate banks, and starting to touch on the investment bank a little bit too. You're probably wondering why we've got what we have got on screen at the moment. Well, actually, there's only 3 of us doing this work. So all of the work that you're seeing has kind of grown organically, and Peter has brought Lee and I into the team, and this is where we're kind of getting to. And the way it works really nicely is because we are trying to push the agenda on lots of things, it's not just Tableau that we're driving into the bank. We're actually looking at how we change perceptions on data through what Peter mentioned as data liberation, but also just exploring what we class as almost new frontiers and exploring data and seeing the connections between it for the first time. So we have different roles within that. Lee is definitely the data man behind the scenes, actually looking and making sure the infrastructure is fit for purpose. And actually that's even done through Tableau as well. So we heavily engage with the BIW teams, and they're actually using Tableau to really explore what's going on behind the scenes. Peter is almost our spotlight character, with being our kind of conscience, trying to drive the agenda forward and actually being in the conscience for what we're doing, to actually make sure we're going in the right direction. And I've kind of cast myself somehow as James Tiberius Kirk, of actually just moving the agenda forward as far as possible, as quick as possible, which isn't always sensible, but it's the way that we're approaching it. And actually what's really important in data analysis and what we're finding is you kind of need to have a little bit of all of these 3 characters around you. So somebody understanding that the fundamentals are there, somebody actually being an objective judge around what you're creating, so you're not just making something that looks cool, but it also actually means what you expect it to mean, and you've created something that does change the subject and move knowledge forward. But also you've got somebody sitting on your shoulder actually just trying to push things as fast as possible and being a little bit belligerent with the kind of people around them and the teams on the outside, or, well, that's my excuse anyway. So that's what we're trying to do and actually push our mission forward, but how have we actually used Tableau to actually really deliver each of those elements?
So just briefly go on now then, following that, to talk about how Tableau has evolved within Barclays and how it fits into our agenda that Carl just mentioned. And I think it's a really important point to get across to a lot of people who will be watching this and thinking about maybe how do I get Tableau to be more embedded in my organisation. So I actually started first using Tableau 3 or 4 years ago now, with just 2 copies of Tableau Desktop 5.2, and that was actually even Tableau Desktop personal version, so very, very sort of basic beginnings. And early on it was just really about myself and another colleague exploring some of the data we had, but we didn't really quite grasp, I don't think, the full potential of Tableau. It's more just a way of improving our visuals and just playing around with the data a little bit more. As time grew on, we kind of realized the potential of using Tableau against our data warehouse directly. And at that point, that was the thing that really kind of sparked the idea of, well, actually, this could be a massive, massive help to us in terms of efficiency and in terms of presentation. So Tableau kind of grew from about 2 users up to about 10 users from really sort of myself introducing it to another team. But after that, Tableau grew very organically amongst the analytical community in Barclays. And the way most people kind of were introduced to it is literally by walking past my screen or by one of the other users' screens, seeing something we were doing, maybe drawing a map or drawing some interesting looking charts, and stopping and saying, wow, how do I do that? How do I get hold of this? What is that? And a lot of people were hooked pretty quickly, because for a data analyst, this tool is fantastic and opens up a whole new world to you. So Tableau really grew and has grown in Barclays through enthusiastic analytical users and also business users who maybe would be kind of at the top end of Excel usage but might not consider themselves data analysts, but had a real passion for data and for getting the most out of it. So that's grown in terms of desktops, but last year we were lucky enough to buy a enterprise server license, which has been fantastic for us. So we've got now 150 odd desktop users, probably 300 plus Tableau server users who are coming in through web access, through Internet Explorer or Google Chrome, to look at some of the things that we're producing, and that number is growing every day. We've got a strong Tableau community that's also growing. We run Tableau training events with the help of the Information Lab, and we run user events where people can come and talk about the things that they're doing. So we have this strong user community that we're building, and it's really led from a sort of grassroots basis. At the same time, though, we've, IT is kind of coming on board and really helping us with some of the back end and making sure that everything's robust, and we've got also security measures in place, which is very important. So instead of boring you with some more of this kind of talk, I think we'll go on and show you some of the things that we've actually done with Tableau.
So in this section, we thought, rather than just speak about how we've gone about it, actually show you some of the use cases that we've come up for Tableau. And the answer is actually we've come up with stuff that we can use continually and all over the shop. And there's nothing that we actually really touched that Tableau hasn't helped us explore further or actually present in a different way that's actually told a different story. And that stretches right across from our core job, improving customers' experience, right through to understanding what doesn't go well within that customer's experience. So actually looking at complaints and the causes of complaints and other causes of dissatisfaction, identifying where in the company that's created. And then finally, we're looking for, like every other corporation, operational excellence. So how are we using Tableau to help that? And again, that almost goes full circle back to putting the data and the information in the hands of the user a lot more. So without further ado, let's go into our Tableau server and see what we've got to talk through. So our first chart I'll walk you through is what we call our new to the UK dashboard. So this is looking at customers who are coming into the UK and then picking up a Barclays bank account. So that's very different from our traditional person lives down the road when they're 18 years old. They'll come into branch for the first time, register for their bank account, probably with the help of their parents or at their parents' recommendation, or that's your only local branch you have if you're in a rural area. We're now seeing this kind of changing dynamic, seeing lots more immigration and migration in general within the UK. So what we wanted to explore was actually look at the number of customers who are coming into our branches, which branches they're coming into, and actually all in all just really get a better understanding of who our customers really are who are using the branches today, because I think everybody within the bank had a very set perception that it was a UK national who would come in and either have a business transaction or a personal transaction, and this dashboard shows it's really not that case at all. So the way we've set this up is using actions and highlighting that we can either select anywhere on the map to actually kind of pick out, or you can actually just use the tooltip and highlight certain areas of the dashboard to understand how many people have come from there, where. So for example, within the last, up to 40 years, that we can actually see 42,000 people have come across from the US, which is fantastic. And 20% of those, so 1/5, have moved within the last couple of years. That tells us quite a lot about the customer needs that we'll have in place for the US customers. And actually let's dig into that a little bit further. So we don't just kind of look at the top line stats of knowing how many, that's helpful, but it doesn't really tell the business what it needs to know to make the relevant changes to get into the data. So for those of you who weren't aware, that's where the United States is. I'd be slightly concerned if that was many of you. What we can see is the map in the bottom left-hand corner has repopulated to actually show what are the branches these customers are most commonly going into. Now, we've done some little clever algorithms behind the scenes, or more to the point one of our colleagues has, to actually come up with an understanding of where our US customers are coming into Barclays and where they're interacting. So we can see the branch in Cambridge, for example, on Bennett Street, or actually Mildenhall in East Anglia, are actually the top places where US customers are coming across and actually interacting with us. Not just where they're setting up their accounts, not just where they live, but actually where they're coming into branch and transacting with us. So we need to have staff that are probably trained on what US identification looks like, because not everybody will have British ID with them, especially at first. Knowing around some of the US tax legislation, so just everything that you'd need to do to support somebody of that nationality in branch. We can see the age profile, so again we can kind of understand who they are. The US actually differs quite a lot here. Normally 25 to 35 sticks out like a lot more than anywhere else, because that's where you'd expect your migrant population to be. But what we're actually seeing is the 35 to 45s and even 45 to 55-year-olds still making up a good proportion of that migration. What you won't see is the full number of customers and some of the profitability metrics that we actually have around this. Obviously, we can't share that all with you today, although we can talk about at length what makes a good customer and what doesn't make a good customer. Unsurprisingly, it's high savings balances, customers staying with us for a long time, and all in all, fees on account. So, for example, paying for the extra benefits like the insurances we offer, etc. It doesn't take a genius to work out that that's what our banking model is, and that's where we generate profit. But this visualization has helped internal users, especially within the branches, really understand what is driving profit and what doesn't drive profit as well. And it's actually dispelled some of the rumours of that, or at least what the thoughts around that were. So by putting data that was commonly held in the bank and has been for years, we've had nationality data and understanding for absolutely ages, but nobody's ever pieced it together in a way that, one, draws people in, secondly, is able to drill through in completely different directions. So not only do we drill through by nationality, we can actually just select which branch we want to go in and look at as well. So we could go and say, for example, Aberdeen in Scotland. Let's go and look at the nationalities that most commonly go into the Aberdeen branch. And this is looking at a lot of data, and I've got slow Wi-Fi, so apologies for that. But it's actually Nigerian customers. I personally wouldn't have expected that. And Polish customers and Indian customers make up the majority of the foreign nationals who go into the Aberdeen branch. So again, from a branch perspective, or also from a head office perspective developing propositions, we actually can start to really dig into this information, or more to the point, the business experts can, and that information is not just trapped with somebody who has to write the SQL code to extract that information out. What other subjects do we look at? Well, we look at social media data. This one's a little bit more populated, so you can actually see what's going on and actually understand how much our social media presence is really driven by sponsorship. So for anybody who wants to know, Peter and I are massive basketball fans. So we love to see the fact that the Brooklyn Nets Arena, aka the Barclays Center, is at the top trender from this data from January 2013. And it actually helps us understand that our social presence or social media presence isn't just about banking. And actually our sponsorships really kind of do leverage value and get the Barclays name out there and into communities we don't really know and see the whole time. The Barclays Premier League, for example, has been really massively beneficial in getting the Barclays name further known across the world. We've traditionally had exposure in Africa, but not so much in the Americas and not so much in Asia, where most people are now synonymous with the Barclays Premier League, even if ESPN does continue to call it the English Premier League, but we'll deal with that over time. There's Facebook-driven aspects as well, but we can also dig into the subjects that are kind of more relevant to us. So we can actually see there's pieces around the leadership and, well, actually just lots and lots about our sponsorship. We can understand the levels of sentiment that are driven from that. We can see the amplification. So, for example, when something's retweeted, how is that driven on from there? And seeing how many followers our messages are touching first and foremost, but then how much that's passed on. And also the behavior of the tweets and of the Facebook mentions, etc. So we see the spikes in activity, not just when news is released, but when news is retweeted by kind of key users. And actually that's going to help us understand and drive our social media strategy going forward. We're still relatively new and albeit somewhat naive in this space, but that's got to be kicked forward. But again, with the help of the information lab, we can actually understand and break down some of this big unstructured data and really drive through what it means for Barclays and get that understanding back into the bank and change the propositions, products, and just the way that we actually transact and relate to our customers. Because these are our customers' words. We always fight to get those, whether they're through telephony and capturing them there, or albeit through written letters and interactions face-to-face in branch. Actually, social media has proven to be a great source of understanding of what our customers are thinking and talking about. But it's not just the good messages, and at that point I'll hand you back to Peter to talk about complaints.
Thank you. Okay, so one of the major areas that we've used Tableau for in the last sort of 6 months to a year is understanding complaints, and the complaints that our customers make to Barclays. If we're going to improve as a business, we really need to understand what makes people tick and what ticks people off. And fortunately, we record most of that data so we can actually start to look into it. So I'm going to show for you 3 different ways of looking at complaints data, which is actually being used in kind of real-life scenarios at the moment within Barclays to help understand the root causes of complaints and drive those down over time. So the first one I'm going to show you is on screen now, and that's called the complaints heat check. Now what this is doing is it's taking data and it's comparing it month on month. So we actually produce a scheduled data feed which goes overnight, so we can look at up to month to date. But the version I'm going to show you right now is just to the end of March, to the end of April, so you can see what the differences are there. So if we look at the data on the screen, we can see here each of our complaints, and the way the complaints data works is that it's in a hierarchy. So each tier 2 topic is made up of multiple subjects and made up of multiple reasons. And we can use the filtering in Tableau to join those things together. So if I look at my charts here, what I've got are the different complaint types, and then this orange line is showing the complaints over time, and we've used a dual axis chart to also produce month-on-month changes, which are these red and green bar charts here. So if I have a look for something that's on the up, which is, for instance here, mortgages, I can click on mortgages, and with any look, it will filter through and show me what is driving that increase in complaints with mortgages. So this is filtered. Or has it filtered? No, it hasn't. Just going to refresh it. Just to bear with me while I refresh the data on this. Okay, this one appears to have broken, which is great. So I'm going to just describe what it should be doing, which is it should be filtering through these different elements that you can see what's picking up what and what's driving the different complaints. So let's skip on to the next one. So again, I've just got to let the data refresh here because it keeps timing out. Now what we're looking at here is the number of complaints that we receive at the branch level. So we've been able to cross data between the complaints data and our branch data, and we can start to understand who's complaining about what and where. So we can see here these are the different branches, and these are color-coded by the number of complaints, and then these charts up here also show them. So we can dig down to a branch level. Again, I think I might have to refresh this.
For the eagle-eyed among you, you might actually notice that Peter's, instead of just used the normal circles, that he's actually used little Barclays eagles, and our brand team absolutely love this. The fact that we could have different sized eagles representing the level of complaint, not necessarily the message they wanted, but did reinforce the brand to internal users and made it a little bit more fun and different to what we'd normally see.
Yeah. So if I, let's for instance zoom in on London, since that's where the conference is taking place, we'll have a look at some of our branches in the London region. Okay, so these are all the branches in London, and you can see the red ones spark out that have more complaints, and green ones have less. These little Barclays eagles are the branches, and they're sized by the number of customers. So I haven't filtered that, but if we look at London, we can see the most red one there is Kew Gardens. And we can select Kew Gardens and filter down there to see what's going on within Kew Gardens. Then the last version of the complaints data that I'm going to show you is this Pareto charts for complaints. Pareto charts are something that you can learn about how to do on the Tableau website, and we found it very useful for this scenario with complaints data. So what we have here, and I'm just going to press refresh again whilst he's waiting. The data we've got here are all the complaints that you saw earlier, and what we're doing is sorting them from the most common topics to the least common, and then using a running total along here to create a Pareto chart. So you can see at this line, 80% of the complaints are within these topics to the left. But because it's Tableau, we can make this interactive. So if I take the topic of complaint which is highest for me, which is debit cards, I can drill down. Or not. Let me just refresh this completely.
So maybe you're refreshing the browser.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just going to have to reset this dashboard. Let's try again. There we go. Okay, now we're on. So if I can drill down within debit cards and have a look what makes up the Pareto chart within there. And again, I can keep drilling down so I can look at what's the more detailed reasons. We're witnessing now the problems of doing a live demo, but you have to bear with us while this happens. I'm just going to refresh this one while it's happening. Okay, Internet Explorer is not responding, so we will have to kind of pause the demo there for a bit and see if it brings itself back to life. But the key point really we want to get across is that we've been able to use Tableau to look into those complaints data sets and really explore them in many different ways, look at the data from different angles, and most importantly be able to get it out to our colleagues so that they can explore the data as well. And that's now being used on a daily basis with people looking at different things. Shall we open a new, let's open another window. Let's try Google because it's usually a bit better.
As Peter's logging in there, you can actually see that we set up projects to control the level of access that individuals have. So not only is it a user-based level of access, we can also set things up into projects so different parts of the business cannot see each other's data. That's really important for our colleagues in HR who obviously deal with some really sensitive information. But actually even hiding certain aspects for as you produce work in terms of insights and actually not wanting to reveal what the answer is until it's finally ready to be shown, as we've often found that until you actually analyse information a few ways, you're always in danger of stumbling across something that doesn't quite mean what you think it should mean.
Okay, so now we've got Google Chrome open, which should be flying, and I'm just going to quickly go back to the dashboard I showed earlier in terms of the complete heat check and show you how that can work. So if I look at mortgages again, this time we should be able to filter through and see how that influences the rest of the dashboard. There we go. Okay, so you can see here these big flags that we're able to build in Tableau to display very easily to our customers in terms of our stakeholders, what's going on in a certain area, and they can go away and deal with that area to reduce complaints. Okay, I think that's probably it for complaints. I'll now pass back to Carl.
And we'll see whether Internet Explorer decides to come back to life for us. So the joys of using corporate laptops. No, that looks well and truly dead. So let's go back into Chrome. So I'll quickly scroll through until I find the relevant piece. We're moving very quickly into a very digital world in banking. So there has been a real slow take-up on how and when banking behaviour has changed. So for a long time there's been a real staunch resistance to, well, for security reasons more than anything else, even adopt telephone banking, online banking, and now we've got the new kind of channel of digital banking. And Barclays have been really evolutionary, going back to Peter's initial first slide, talking about Barclays are one for firsts. And our use of Ping It, so innovative way of doing peer-to-peer payment through mobiles, even through to the mobile app and how much access that gives the user to actually do their banking on the go, and how that's changing the relationship of those customers with the bank. So rather scarily, we can actually see the volumes really increasing over time for both first-party transfers, so me moving money to myself, third-party payments, me paying an individual, or me paying off my Barclays card, is really growing over time. So not just the number of transactions, but also the value of those transactions. They're all moving, and very quickly. What we're seeing is people are not just interacting with their bank as they used to, maybe once or twice a week at most, by actually going into branch or phoning up and changing certain debits or credits on their banking, but actually starting to interact a lot more frequently, almost to the point of we have some users who are using and logging into mobile banking 2, 3, 4 times a day. Now that's changing the relationship that we have with the customer and gives us huge opportunity. But it's also kind of putting us under a significant amount of pressure to actually produce the information the individual wants to see in the right way, and also make sure that it's a secure environment for them without impinging on them too much, and actually keeping that kind of strong, secure and robust transactions that we have to do, or face penalty from the regulators, of course. And we're actually seeing that the behaviours differs. So our normal customer base would sometimes peak around mid-30s through to mid-40s, but we're seeing our digital bankers are actually a lot more in the younger age groups. Now, the early thoughts around this were it was purely going to be based on early adopters. Early adopters of technology are normally younger. That will surprise none of you. But actually what we're seeing with digital banking is they've actually stayed younger. So these guys have come online. Traditionally we'd see as such a young age group not having much of a relationship with a bank. But digital banking through mobile phones and apps are really driving and changing the way that we relate to those individuals. And actually it's giving us a lot more chance to help people with their financial health right from the word go, rather than necessarily waiting to somebody in their later 20s and 30s when you're starting to look for a home for the first time, when some of life's events are kind of hitting you for the first time and you're all of a sudden kind of experiencing things where your finances are a lot more stretched rather than kind of your more affluent younger years, that you're actually having to kind of focus on banking for the first time. So actually it's allowing us to help the customers right from the word go and build that relationship a lot sooner. But at the end of the day, we're still talking about our younger customers who are less affluent as well. So we've got to kind of offset that long-term advice to make sure that our customers are profitable for us, and also that we provide a good, profitable service for them. So again, using Tableau in a very different way to produce different visualizations, to tell the story of what's going on behind the scenes, of not just the new propositions that we're coming out to market with, but inform our leaders on a day-to-day basis through the complaints work, allowing them to dig through and find where in their 140,000 person organisation the issues are happening so they can go and fix them before it's impacting the customer too much, and also going all the way back and looking at how we can improve the customer experience for the better, and actually looking at preventing customer dissatisfaction before we even begin. That's some of the ways that we demonstrate and visualise the information, but one of our tricks that we found is to not actually just answer questions, but actually proactively try and allow the user to explore the data more. So data liberation and getting the users involved a lot more in the actual exploration. They're the experts. As much as Peter, Lee and I know about Barclays, we actually don't know everything, no surprise there. There's 140,000 people, other people who know the business or aspects of the business a lot better than we do. So it's trying to help them get hold of the data, which traditionally is through SQL. The extract that I'll take you through, we have loaded into the server for speed's sake more than anything else, but we're looking at 14.5 million rows here, so a good sized piece of data. And traditionally we'd produce a visualization that would look at, for example, transactional methods. So let's look at the number of, we're just looking at the average number of debits that are done through Barclays mobile banking, or BNB as it's also known. Let's compare that to the number of ATM debits that a user would do on average. So this is looking at a single row for every single one of our customers, and we're just averaging that off, and the response times are fantastic for 14.5 million rows of data. So let's make Tableau think about this a bit more. Well, age is actually a dimension I want to look at rather than measure, so let's drop that into color. Actually, let's make that color make a little bit more sense. So let's fade it over time. So this is where Peter's favorite cyclic color palette comes into real use. And we can actually look at that over time. Let's make it a little bit clearer by filling in those plots, and let's size the plot by the number of customers we have in that space. So what is this going to tell me? Well, let's just make it look a little bit more like a worm, and we talk about our customer worm quite a lot. It plots over time, so from our 16-year-olds all the way through your life ranges up to 20-year-olds, where you're actually doing most of your ATM debits, through to when you're doing most of your Barclays mobile banking debits at 25, like we saw on a previous visualization. And then how the number of both ATM debits drops and the number of Barclays mobile banking debits drops as well. But that tells me about one relationship, and I think we are all aware that correlation doesn't necessarily equal causation. So how can we kind of dig into the data a lot more to actually really understand what's going on? Well, that's where we've got to hand the data over to the user, and unless we're going to mind read, which is fundamentally impossible for us, that we need to kind of allow the user to kind of really get to grips with the data. So this is where we make use of Tableau and its parameters a lot more. So let's create a parameter. So for example, let's start off by creating something that would populate our x-axis. So where we had BNB transactions before, let's create something that will do a lot of that. So I'm creating a calculated field, not parameter. Create the parameter, and let's make something that will suit the x-axis. Let's call it x-axis metrics. Okay, what I'm going to use is I'm going to use the string functionality on this and actually just create a list of metrics to analyze. Now I'm just going to pick 5 at random just for speed's sake. We do this with whole lists of metrics, and we structure them in a way that the user can go about and find them. One trick with parameters that I've really found is in the value, whatever you show in the value has to be perfectly identical for what you later capture in the calculated field that I'll show you in a few moments' time. So we found a little sneaky piece of actually just creating a really quick parameter by using the numbers 1 through to 5. Now, what Tableau does is actually allows you to put something into more customer-friendly terms. So let's talk about the number of mobile banking debits. Let's talk about the average number of ATM debits. So this would, if we just had these two pieces alone, it would mimic that first chart I've just created. But let's add a few more in. So let's look at the average number of debit transactions made in shops, for example. Let's look at the more traditional piece that still plagues banking to the day, the idea of a check, which I was recently in Lithuania demoing some of the things that we do to our tech center, and they don't actually have checks, the lucky people. So we spend our lives battling with checks. That some people love them, other people hate them. So trying to get the right customer journey around that is always fun. Let's go for the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Let's look at contactless debits. So that is my parameter created. As simple as that. It needs to read from something. We'll produce that in a second. But that's our basic piece. So if we just show that quickly, you can see that's now created in the nice customer-friendly terms what I'm actually going to measure. You could just make a parameter on one axis, but we love our scalar plots, so let's make them on two. So let's duplicate that. And we'll see that the copy is being created down here. Let's go in and edit that, and let's just change that name. Let's call it the y-axis. Don't think that will surprise anybody. And that's all we have to do. We now have 2 fantastic parameters that we can now go and use. So again, show parameter control, and let's make them different things. Fantastic. Now we need to actually point those parameters to something, and that's where we come in with the calculate field. Again, another fantastic use of Tableau that basically puts the user completely in control. So you're not having to go back to your data source, which can be sometimes laborious. Sometimes in the corporate world you won't even have access to that. So this is really putting the power back into the user's hands. So let's call this our x-axis metrics values. And let's just create a really simplistic if statement. So if our x-axis metrics is equal to our shortcut 1, then let's look at the average of our BNB debits. Then all my syntax is going to be is actually kind of repeating the same again. So if we're not looking at 1, then let's look at 2. And if we remember correctly, then what we're looking at there is our number of ATM debits. And then if you want to cheat, the modern day world of cut and paste is an absolute blessing in this space, or you can create a spreadsheet and copy it back across. Just create a few copies of that, so we've got our 5 different pieces to go at. There's our cheats in, and all we have to do now is just replace the metrics that we were analysing with the ones we want to do. So point of sale, i.e. debits in shops. We'll look at our check debits, and finally let's look at our contactless debits as well. So that's in there. And like any good if statement, we just need to have ends there, and Bob's your uncle, we have a statement that Tableau loves and is happy with. Fantastic. So let's OK that. And then our final aspect is taking that x-axis metric value, duplicating it to create one for y. And in this one, just remember not just to change your title. Let's just go and do that. Let's actually change what parameter it's looking at. If we just looked at x, we'd make the mistake of whenever we change the x-axis, it would change both the values, and that would be a bit pointless because you'd just see a linear relationship the whole time. So fantastic, that's done. Let's make our viz. So previously, I dragged in the average of BNB debits and the average ATM debits. In this instance, what we're going to take is our aggregate measure. So first of all, our x-axis. Secondly, our y-axis aggregate measure. And it's already programmed in to look at the average. So that's the job done for me. And just in the same way as before, let's put color into age. That should remember from previous times that we're looking cyclic. Let's make it a filled bubble instead, so it's a little bit easier to see, and let's bump up that size a little bit. So already we can start to see the relationship that we were seeing before, apart from the one aspect that we're missing, which is the number of records, to kind of show how many customers we have attached to each of those age groups. And lo and behold, I've managed to replicate exactly what I've done before, this time with the parameters. So what we can do now is actually allow the user, if we publish this through the server, or we pass around the work in other ways, that they can actually get in and under the skin and actually play with the data so they can see the relationships for themselves. And this is what's really powerful, that you're not just creating a finding, you're actually creating the user to find their own data. And that's what's kind of really shown through right through all of our dashboards. It's allowing the user to explore. There's a few things we can do to polish this off, and rather than call X and Y axis, because not everybody's kind of au fait with that terminology anymore. Education's not quite what it used to be, and that's coming from me. Then we can look at the X and Y axis, pop the parameters in, just to make it that little bit easier, hide some of the column names, and what we can do is actually just take away some of the excess labeling that Tableau normally really helpfully puts in, but because I'm trying to be a little bit clever with this, it just creates a little bit too much in the actual titles. And there we go. As we change our metrics, we see the complete graph repopulate, we see your labeling change, and actually creates a really, really strong view of how the relationships between our transactions change over time. And from this, it's helped us develop propositions around how people want to interact. It's allowed us to understand, as people go through different age groups, are the transactional behavior going to change to mimic what we've had before? Or are the new transactional channels that we're putting into market really changing what we need to have in place? Normally we'd throw you over for questions now, but as you can, if you remember from the start of our talk, Our Twitter handles are there. We're happy to answer questions around the information for what you've seen today. Apologies for the slow Wi-Fi and the pause out on the browser, but there we go. That's how we use Tableau at Barclays.